Hello friends and viewers, and welcome to my Ciri character guide. If you are just here for a quick reference, I've created a pocket guide for the beginning of the video. Ciri's trait is the Elder Blood. This trait increases her speed by 100, placing her speed at 252. At the start of battle, she gains 1 energy. When ending turn by non-standby methods, if not having Winged Repose, Ciri can use the skill Blink, limited to 1 time per round. Winged Repose is a debuff that functionally places Blink on cooldown with a base duration of 4 turns. Blink allows Ciri to teleport, move, and re-attack, and is on cooldown via the Winged Repose debuff. At higher star level, Blink has increased range, can restore energy, and reduce skill cooldowns. Here's a quick table detailing Ciri's growth at each star level. She has notable gains at star level 3 and star level 5. Ciri's initial skill is Charge. This is a 3 energy cost, 0 turn cooldown ability. Ciri selects one location within a cross-shaped range of 2 to 4 tiles, charging to that location and dealing 170% physical damage to the enemy closest to the endpoint. In other words, this skill only strikes a single target. Enemies struck are inflicted with Stagger. Stagger is a control bound debuff that stuns the target for 1 turn at the start of their turn. While control and bound debuffs can typically be immunized by bosses, the stagger state cannot be. Even if a target has bound immunity, they can still be affected by the stagger debuff and considered bound. Charge also has an additional passive effect, inflicting stagger on targets after Ciri's basic attacks. At rank 1, I recommend Light That Breaks the Night with the Convallaria for Ciri's Candor. Light That Breaks the Night deals 30% physical AoE damage to all enemies within 3 tiles of her, and inflicts stagger for 1 turn. This ability has a low skill multiplier, but its primary purpose is to set up stagger debuffs on multiple enemies. Ciri's Candor passively increases her crit by 40%. Additionally, against enemies inflicted with bound debuffs, she will always land critical hits and deal 20% more damage. At rank 3, I recommend Flash That Cuts Through Darkness with the Convallaria for Nova. Flash That Cuts Through Darkness is Ciri's signature ability, dealing AoE damage to the closest 3 enemies within 4 tiles of her. When striking 1 enemy, the skill multiplier is 120%, and for each additional enemy hit, the skill multiplier decreases by 20% up to 40%. When attacking targets with bound debuffs, Ciri's attack increases by 80%. Nova deals AoE damage to all enemies within 3 tiles of her and knocks adjacent targets back by 2 tiles. When attacking targets with bound debuffs, Nova deals 2 times the damage and knockback effects. If Ciri is in Winged Repose, then attacks with Nova will treat the targets as being affected by bound. Nova synergizes with the Ciri's Candor passive. Because Nova treats targets as affected by bound when Ciri has Winged Repose, Nova will always critical strike and deal more damage. At rank 5, I recommend the Lion Cub of Sintra. With the Lion Cub of Sintra, Ciri gains 3 stacks of damage lock after using Blink. Damage lock means damage taken from a single attack cannot exceed 50% of her HP. Additionally, after being attacked or using skills with teleportation or charge effects, Ciri will restore 40% of her lost HP. This can trigger up to 2 times per round. Fleeing Hair grants Ciri a Move 2 buff after being attacked, as well as decreasing active damage taken by 8%. The Lion Cub of Sintra adds self-sustain and utility to her skill kit, and Damage Lock is a powerful effect to mitigate high single target damage. As her star level grows, she will achieve higher uptime of this reaction skill. At rank 7, I recommend Temporal Shift with the Convallaria for Homecoming Swallow. Temporal Shift is a non-instant active support skill. At the end of Ciri's turn, she will restore 1 energy, reduce all skill cooldowns by 1 turn, and reduce the duration of Winged Repose by 1 turn. However, if Blink was used, the Winged Repose duration reduction effect will not activate. Additionally, Ciri's basic attacks will trigger the above effects. Homecoming Swallow is an instant support skill. It is similar to Leonite's charge stance in the sense that Homecoming Swallow stays active until you deactivate it with Departing Swallow. Upon cast, Ciri gains Nest's Call. Physical attacks will inflict speed 2 down on targets. Notably, AoE attacks will inflict speed 2 down on all enemies hit. This is a low priority skill to Convallaria, but if you lack Agata in your roster, you might consider Convallaria for this. At the end of Ciri's turn, she will teleport to the closest ally within 5 tiles and restore 30% HP and 1 energy. If there are no allies within range, Ciri will still restore HP and energy. At rank 9, I recommend Fatal Attack. Fatal Attack adds greater crit damage, and Feverish Attack adds lifesteal to Ciri's basic attack. I recommend Fatal Attack because it has the higher damage ceiling. At rank 11, your options are Assault or Dimension Traveler. Assault is the same skill we are familiar with from some other units such as Hasna and Cole. It is an instant support skill granting Ciri crit 1, crit damage 1, and move 2 buffs. Dimension Traveler is a generic leader's aura for Dimension Traveler allies, which consist of the other Witcher 3 units as well as the Delicious and Dungeon units. However, note that Geralt has a learnable unique Dimension Traveler aura. Neither skill will be a regular part of Ciri's loadout, so make your selection based on the Witcher 3 units you may or may not pull. My pick here is Assault. Ciri has the generic Ascension skill Untamed Spirit and a unique Ascension skill, the Lady of Space and Time. The Lady of Space and Time increases the damage and crit damage of non-first skills by 10%. If she used Blink, crit damage is additionally increased by 10%. Untamed Spirit increases damage and reduces damage taken with less conditionals. However, the Lady of Space and Time will enable a greater damage ceiling. This build focuses on single target damage, adding auxiliary passives to Ciri's basic attacks through Temporal Shift and Charge. Flash that cuts through darkness should be cast on cooldown, ideally against enemies with bound debuffs prior to cast. At higher star level, or if Ciri has allies inflicting bound debuffs, substitute Charge for Ciri's Candor. This build focuses on AoE damage, using Light That Breaks the Night to set up Stagger, then casting Nova after Blink. Nova and Ciri's Candor synergize with each other, making Nova always land critical hits and deal increased damage during Winged Repose. At higher star level, or if Ciri has allies inflicting bound debuffs, substitute Light That Breaks the Night for Flash That Cuts Through Darkness. Ciri's Astral Imprint is Zerail. After triggering teleportation or charge effects, the wielder's next attack deals 25% increased damage. For Ciri, if the skill is Flash That Cuts Through Darkness, Flash will strike one more target and deal 25% additional damage. If the skill is Nova, Nova will additionally knock targets back by 2 tiles and deal 25% additional damage as well. Some other units that may get usage out of this weapon include Estra, Shaklulu, and Aisha. As a side note, Space-Time Ring can be used to trigger the damage increase as well. For weapon recommendations, other than Zerail, Blade of Stratagem is a competitive option for Ciri, increasing her physical attack and active crit damage. If neither of the above are accessible options for you, you can consider Void Stab. As Ciri can cast several skills per turn, she can quickly accrue and maintain void stacks, especially at higher star levels. However, I do not recommend using this if she is actively using basic attacks. Otherwise, Newborn Blade is a fine default option. For trinket recommendations, Shield of Justice and Origin Hourglass's attribute increases are always reliable if you have these trinkets to spare. Breath Concealing Ring can be a strong option for single target damage on turns Ciri has Blink available, initiating with a basic attack and casting an active skill after Blink. Given Ciri's mobility and toughness through her reaction skill, Maverick's Cloak can be a reasonable option. Not pictured here, at higher star levels, you can consider Flying Blade Armguard for single target or Roaring Flint for AoE to set up burst damage with Blink's cooldown reduction, and use as a first hit for her Ascension skill. For Terra recommendations, both Verdict of Justice and Dream of the Magician are fine options for Ciri's damage output, preferring Verdict of Justice for single target and Dream of the Magician for AoE. On any maps with high target count, such as allies, enemies, summons, and NPCs, it is always reasonable to consider Temptation of the Devil. For engravings, Sword and Wand remains a reliable option for the attack and defense increase after moving. Ciri should be able to optimize the gains regularly as movement is a regular part of her gameplay flow. For a quick overview of external category buffs, Geralt's Bonds of Kaer Morhen increases damage and piercing damage done by 10% and by an additional 20% against enemies with bound debuffs. Rico's World's My Oyster offers damage and crit bonuses, scaling with number of targets hit. Miguel's World Drifter uniquely provides more attack and defense than the typical leader's auras. Lutfi's Moment of Crisis increases attack against enemies with 3 or more debuffs, and Cole's Perfect Assassin increased crit and crit damage by a constant 15%. That concludes this character guide. If you have any feedback to share, please leave a comment below. I'm always open to listening and learning, and I don't mind being wrong. I'm another player improving and exploring more of Sword of Convallaria just like you. Remember, if you come across information that conflicts with other guides or content creators, it simply means there are multiple ways to build a character and still achieve success. I also want to credit the Sociage and Billy Game fan sites for their data mining, skill descriptions, and art assets. If you enjoyed this guide, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope to see you in the next one. Hello friends and viewers, and welcome to my Geralt character guide. If you are just here for a quick reference, I've created a pocket guide for the beginning of the video. Geralt's trait is Geralt of Rivia. His magical attack is unaffected by buffs and debuffs and always equals his physical attack. He also gains the skill Witcher Potions. Note that Geralt's magical damage scales with his magical attack, but again, his magical attack always equals his physical attack. He has increased crit, movement, as well as energy reduction at higher star level, and after using any of his Witcher's potions, he gains Regeneration 2 and Damage Reduction 2 buffs. After performing physical attacks, he will inflict physical defense down on the target, and after performing magical attacks, he will inflict magical defense down on the target. And at the start of battle, he gains 2 stacks of Quen Shield. The table here displays his growth at each star level. He has notable gains at star level 3 and star level 5. As part of his trait skill, Geralt possesses Witcher Potions. This is a decision skill where you can select to use Swallow, Thunderbolt, Tawny Owl, or Maribor Forest. Geralt can have up to 2 potion effects simultaneously. Swallow, which restores HP, Thunderbolt, which increases physical attack, Tawny Owl, which restores energy, and Maribor Forest, which increases crit. Your top 2 potions will regularly be Thunderbolt and Maribor Forest. His initial skill is Quen Sign, a decision skill selecting between Quen Swiftguard or Quen Fortified. Quen Swiftguard is an instant skill that grants him 1 stack of Quen Shield. Quen Fortified is a non-instant skill that costs 3 energy and grants him 4 stacks of Quen Shield. Quen Shield is a physical shield equal to 15% of his HP, stacking up to 4 times. When broken, Quen Shield will deal 35% magical AoE damage to all enemies within 3 tiles of Geralt and knock the adjacent targets back by 1 tile. When multiple stacks are broken at once, the effects stack. At rank 1, I recommend Finisher Whirl with a Castalia for Igni Sign. Finisher Whirl is Geralt's primary energy spender for physical AoE damage, dealing a cumulative total of 150% damage. Igni Sign adds an active source of magical damage to Geralt's skill kit. Igni Rotation is an instant skill that deals minor fire AoE damage and adds additional magical damage to his physical attacks. Igni Firestream deals up to 160% total of fire AoE damage to enemies in a 3x3 area, and Geralt gains 40% attack before attacking. This also makes Geralt's primary energy spender for magical AoE damage. At rank 3, I recommend Finisher Rend with a Castalia for Ard Sign. Finisher Rend is Geralt's primary energy spender for single target damage, increasing his attack by 40%, then dealing 180% damage to all targets within 4 tiles in front of him. Ard Sign's primary function is for its knockback utility, knocking back enemies 1 tile via Ard Blast and 4 tiles with Ard Storm. Notably, after casting Ard Blast, Geralt will deal 50% increased final damage from his next attack, which he will most likely spend on either of his finishers. At rank 5, I recommend Fleet-Footed. Fleet-Footed reduces damage taken by 20% and range damage by an additional 20%. When Geralt is targeted by single target attacks, he will perform dodge once per round. He will also perform assisting cover specifically for Dimension Traveler allies when they take physical attacks. Hardening decreases active damage taken by 8%, which is lower than Fleet-Footed's mitigation. Damage Reduction 2 is also made redundant at higher star levels when Geralt gains the same buff through his trait. At rank 7, I recommend Yrden Spin Attack. Yrden Spin Attack is an instant sign skill, dealing 2 hits of AoE damage within 3 tiles of Geralt, and inflicting move, speed, and vulnerable 2 debuffs to each target hit. This ability is a quick way to debuff and crowd control enemies, and as an instant skill, Geralt can capitalize on the vulnerable 2 debuffs with his next cast. Geralt's Composure reduces damage taken by 20% and increases damage against enemies with bound debuffs. While this is a fine passive by itself, it contests with Bonds of Kaer Morhen at rank 11. At rank 9, I recommend Powerful Attack. Powerful Attack adds 10% more damage to Geralt's basic attack. Sealing Attack blocks passive skills against injured targets. Powerful Attack is recommended here for the greater damage output, as passive skill blocks can commonly be found elsewhere. At rank 11, I recommend Bonds of Kaer Morhen with the Castalia for Axii Execution. Bonds of Kaer Morhen is a unique leader's aura for Dimension Traveler allies, which include units from The Witcher 3 and Delicious in Dungeon collaborations. Damage and piercing damage increase by 10%, and against enemies with bound debuffs, damage further increased by 20%. Axii Execution is an instant sign skill, debuffing a single target with stagger, blocking their passive and reaction skills, and deals 70% physical damage. This is a quick way to inflict an enemy with a bound debuff and utilize the additional increase from Bonds of Kaer Morhen. Geralt has the generic Ascension skill Valiant Vanguard and a unique Ascension skill Battle Trance. With Battle Trance, each time Geralt deals damage, he gains a stack of Battle Trance. Battle Trance is a buff that increases attack and defense by 1% up to 10 stacks. Geralt can generate 5 stacks through Finisher Rend, and at level 3, each stack of Battle Trance will additionally increase damage dealt by 2% as well. Battle Trance brings greater damage and mitigation than Valiant Vanguard. While Battle Trance can be at risk of being dispelled, Geralt can accrue and cap stacks very quickly, especially in AoE. For skill builds, this build focuses on AoE physical damage, casting Yrden Spin Attack on cooldown to inflict debuffs, and using Finisher Whirl as Geralt's core energy spender. Geralt will require external support with maintaining bound debuffs for Bonds of Kaer Morhen's increases. In scenarios where Geralt's allies may benefit more from creating burning tiles, consider substituting Yrden for Igni Sign. This build focuses on single target damage, casting Axii Execution on cooldown to inflict debuffs, and using Finisher Rend as Geralt's core energy spender. Axii Execution requires Geralt to be adjacent to his target, whereas Finisher Rend has a 4-tile range. In scenarios where the range may be more advantageous, consider substituting Axii for Ard Sign. Finally, this build focuses on dealing magical damage, maintaining Quench shields, and using Igni Sign as Geralt's core energy spender. This is not a long-term playstyle, but is still a unique quality that Geralt brings both physical and magical damage in his skill kit. In scenarios where magical damage is more valuable against physical enemies and you have few options in your roster, consider trying this out. Geralt's Astral Imprint is Witcher's Swords. Upon activating any of his sign skills, the character's attack and defense increase by 32%. As Geralt is currently the only wielder for sign skills, this weapon fits him the best. All of his sign skills are instant, so his next non-instant cast utilize the attribute bonuses. For weapon recommendations, other than the Witcher's Swords, Blade of Stratagem is a competitive option for Geralt, increasing his physical attack and active crit damage. If neither of the above are accessible options for you, you can consider Void Stab. As Geralt can cast several skills per turn between Witcher potions and sign skills, he can quickly accrue and maintain void stacks, especially at higher star levels. Otherwise, Newborn Blade is a fine option to fall back on. For trinket recommendations, Shield of Justice and Origin Hourglass's attribute increases are always reliable if you have these trinkets to spare. Given Geralt's mobility and toughness throughout his skill kit, Maverick's Cloak can be a reasonable option. Not pictured here, after unlocking his Battle Stance Succession skill, you can consider Flying Blade Armguard or Roaring Flint as additional tools to accrue Battle Stance stacks. For tarot options, both Dream of the Magician and Verdict of Justice are fine options for Geralt's damage output, preferring Dream of the Magician for AoE and Verdict of Justice for single target. On any maps with high target count, ranging from allies, enemies, summons, and NPCs, it is always reasonable to consider Temptation of the Devil. For a general option, Course of Fortune is a versatile and hybrid choice for damage, healing, mitigation, and energy recovery. As Geralt's magical attack always equals his physical attack, the AoE shockwave from Course of Fortune has greater potential compared to other characters, and it also helps accrue battle stance stacks. For engravings, Sword and Wand remains a reliable option for the attack and defense increase after moving. For a quick overview of external category buffs, Rico's World's My Oyster offers damage and crit bonuses, scaling with number of targets hit. Miguel's World's Drifter uniquely provides more attack and defense than the typical leader's auras. Magnus's Blood and Steel reduces damage taken while healthy and grants immunity to the negative effects of injured, improving overall survivability. Aisha's Moonlit Hills aura boosts attack and defense by an additional 8%, and like Magnus, reduces damage taken while healthy as well. That concludes this character guide. If you have any feedback to share, please leave a comment below. I'm always open to listening and learning, and I don't mind being wrong. I'm another player improving and exploring more of Sword of Convallaria just like you. Remember, if you come across information that conflicts with other guides or content creators, it simply means there are multiple ways to build a character and still achieve success. I also want to credit the Sociage and Billy Game fan sites for their data mining, skill descriptions, and art assets. If you enjoyed this guide, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope to see you in the next one. Hello friends and viewers, and welcome to my Yennefer character guide. If you are just here for a quick reference, I've created a pocket guide for the beginning of the video. Yennefer's trait is Yennefer of Vengerberg. She gains a passive increase to her magical attack and the instant skill Magic Surge. Casting Magic Surge triggers Magic Boost, empowering several of her skills and further increasing her magical attack. Magic Exhaustion is a debuff that functionally puts Magic Surge on cooldown, removing a stack after casting non-instant skills or performing standby. Her initial skill is Erosion. Erosion is a 1 energy cost, 0 turn cooldown skill. It deals 5% more damage than a basic attack and inflicts 2 random level 2 attribute debuffs on a single target. This is helpful to have in early Voyager progression against bosses, but long term, it will not be a regular part of Yennefer's skill loadout. At rank 1, I recommend Yennefer's Heal. Yennefer's Heal is a 1 energy cost, 0 turn cooldown skill, healing a single target and dispelling 1 debuff. For its auxiliary passive effect, if Yennefer did not cast a skill, then she will heal the ally with the lowest HP within 3 tiles of her. Corruption inflicts 2 random level 1 attribute debuffs on a single enemy within 3 tiles at the end of Yennefer's turn. Not only do level 1 attribute debuffs become more redundant as your character roster grows, but optimizing this skill requires Yennefer to be in a 3-tile range of enemies. She has several skills with range greater than 3 tiles. Long term, neither skill will be a regular part of Yennefer's loadout. At rank 3, your options are Embrace of Shadows and Elemental Control. Embrace of Shadows is a 3 energy cost, 0 turn cooldown skill. Yennefer selects a target tile and performs 2 actions. 1. She deals AoE damage to enemies within 2 tiles and inflicts 1 random level 2 debuff. And 2. She heals allies within the same range and grants them a damage 3 buff and immunity to frosty and burning tiles. When having magic boost, Embrace of Shadows becomes Shadow Veil of Fate. The table on the right summarizes the effects of Embrace of Shadows and what changes upon becoming Shadow Veil of Fate. Elemental Control is a decision skill of 3 abilities, each costing 3 energy. Ball Lightning, dealing 170% magical damage to a single target, Pyrokinesis, dealing 120% fire AoE damage in a horizontal row and turning tiles to burning, and Hail, dealing 120% ice AoE damage to enemies within 2 tiles of the target. When having magic boost, Elemental Control becomes Elemental Storm. Elemental Storm deals 180% damage to enemies within 3 tiles of the target, decreasing the multiplier by 15% for each additional target hit, up to 45%. Yennefer's attack and crit increase before attacking, and this skill inflicts a vulnerable 3 debuff on targets within 2 tiles of her. She will also inflict 1 stack of ignition on targets after attacking and turn the impacted tiles to frosty. To recap, I recommend Embrace of Shadows. Embrace of Shadows is recommended due to its damage buff and debuff effects, as well as granting allies with frosty and burning tile immunity. If you are interested in playing a damage-focused Yennefer, consider Castalia for Elemental Control. At rank 5, I recommend Evasive Shift. Evasive Shift reduces damage taken by 10% and reduces magical damage taken by an additional 30%. When Yennefer is about to receive an enemy's active single target attack from the front or side, she will trigger Preempt, interrupt the enemy's action, deal 50% magical damage, and inflict 2 random level 2 debuffs. After triggering, Yennefer will teleport to the closest ally within 2 to 6 tiles, and the effect enters a 2-turn cooldown. Protection of Darkness reduces damage taken by 8% when Yennefer is hit by an active attack. Before the attack, the damage taken is further reduced by 10% for each debuff on the attacker, up to a maximum additional reduction of 30%. Protection of Darkness is slightly better at mitigating physical damage, whereas Evasive Shift is better against mitigating magical damage. However, Evasive Shift has greater opportunity to avoid damage taken with its interrupt while also returning some damage. At rank 7, I recommend Portal with a Castalia for Charming Illusion. Portal allows Yennefer to select an ally or an enemy and move them to an empty location 6 tiles away. If cast on an ally, Portal grants them damage 3 and speed 2 buffs. If cast on an enemy, Portal deals 100% magical damage and stuns them for 1 turn. After teleporting, Portal will trigger additional damage via Pursuit within a 2-tile radius and inflict vulnerable 3 on targets. Charming Illusion allows Yennefer to create an illusion at a target location and inflict Bewitch on enemies within a 2-tile radius. Casting Bewitch will deal 80% magical damage and inflict vulnerable 3 on targets. When having Magic Boost, both abilities become instant, allowing Yennefer to cast Portal or Charming Illusion twice in 1 turn. At rank 9, your options are Dispelling Strike or Charged Attack. Dispelling Strike dispels 2 buffs on an enemy target, and Charged Attack will increase the damage of Yennefer's next skill. Yennefer will infrequently cast Basic Attack, and which option you select may depend on the state of your character roster. If you cannot decide, consider selecting based on the HP or defense stat gain. My pick here is Charged Attack. At rank 11, I recommend Tisaia's Teaching. Tisaia's Teaching reduces all class skill cooldowns by 1 turn and restores 1 energy when casting non-magic empowerment skills. Yennefer's Mockery increases damage by 30% and by an additional 30% against targets with Bound. Tisaia's Teaching best benefits Yennefer's support flow. However, if you are interested in playing a damage-focused Yennefer, consider a Castalia for Yennefer's Mockery. Yennefer has the generic Ascension skill, Blessing of Divine Shield, and the unique Ascension skill, Magical Insight. Magical Insight increases Yennefer's damage and healing output with and without Magic Boost, which is more meaningful for general play. Blessing of Divine Shield is only impactful when more magical damage mitigation is required. For skill builds, this build focuses on supportive play, using Portal to traverse allies on the battlefield and either Embrace of Shadows for group buffs and debuffs, or Charming Illusion for enemy crowd control. This build focuses on damage, using Magic Surge on cooldown for Elemental Storm and casting Elemental Control skills between Magic Surge casts. Yennefer's Astral Imprint is Obsidian Star. Obsidian Star passively increases both magical damage and healing effects. Unique to Yennefer, before using magic empowerment skills, she gains the Obsidian Star 4 buff. Obsidian Star 4 increases magical damage by another 16% and healing effects by another 12%. Skills cast on allies will dispel 1 debuff, and skills cast on enemies will dispel 1 buff. This fits Yennefer's gameplay profile well, but for other characters, there are more competitive options for damage and healing. For weapon recommendations, other than Obsidian Star, Diffusing Prism is a more accessible and competitive option to increase Yennefer's magical attack and damage. Consider Focus Wand to increase Yennefer's single target range, especially when playing with Portal. Starry Sky Heritage and Reorganized Cube can be valid options as well, depending on your skill selections. For trinket recommendations, their attribute increases from Shield of Justice and Origin Hourglass are always reliable if these are strongly at your disposal. If playing with a damage focus, consider Bloodluxite Amulet. If playing with a support focus, consider Old Scrolls of August or even Disaster Bottle. For tarot recommendations, which tarot you equip depends on your skill loadout. Magician to increase your damage output, Elegance of the Empress for debuff conversion, Mercy of the High Priestess to increase your healing, or Temptation of the Devil on any maps with high target count. For engravings, Sword and Wand remains a reliable engraving combination for the attribute increases after moving, benefiting her damage and healing outputs. You can consider Cup and Wand in a support-focused playstyle for the cooldown reset and energy refund, increasing the frequency of casts like Portal and Charming Illusion. For a quick overview of external category buffs, Geralt's Bonds of Kaer Morhen increases damage and piercing damage done by 10% and by an additional 20% against enemies with bound debuffs. Rico's World's My Oyster grants damage and crit bonuses, scaling with the number of targets hit. Miguel's World Drifter uniquely provides more attack and defense than the typical leader's auras. Akambe's Rewards and Punishments will reduce the cooldown of Yennefer's portal by 1 turn. That concludes this character guide. If you have any feedback to share, please leave a comment below. I'm always open to listening and learning, and I don't mind being wrong. I'm another player improving and exploring more of Sword of Convallaria just like you. Remember, if you come across information that conflicts with other guides or content creators, it simply means there are multiple ways to build a character and still achieve success. I also want to credit the Sociage and Billy Game fan sites for their data mining, skill descriptions, and art assets. If you enjoyed this guide, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope to see you in the next one. Hello friends and viewers, and welcome to my Triss character guide. If you are just here for a quick reference, I've created a pocket guide for the beginning of the video. Triss's trait is Elemental Surge. Triss is completely immune to both burning and frosty tiles, along with all their effects. Her healing received is reduced by 50%, but in return, any shields she gains are increased by 50%. And as long as she's protected by a shield, she can't be interrupted. Triss gains a 25% boost to her magical attack and can trigger Rhythm of Frostfire. Rhythm of Frostfire occurs when Triss casts an ice skill on an enemy standing on burning tiles or a fire skill on an enemy standing on frosty tiles. She deals an extra 40% elemental AoE damage to all enemies within 1 tile of the target. Each enemy can be hit by this effect up to 2 times. Whenever Rhythm of Frostfire triggers, her damage is further increased by 20%, she restores 2 energy, and reduces all class skill cooldowns by 2 turns. After she actively attacks, the target is inflicted with Frostfire weakness, causing them to take 20% increased damage the next time they're hit by an ice or fire skill. And finally, at the end of each turn, if Triss is standing on a burning or frosty tile, she gains both a physical shield and a magical shield, each equal to 20% of her magical attack. Here's a quick table detailing Triss's growth at each star level. She has notable gains at star level 3 and star level 5. Her initial skill is Teleport. Teleport is a 0 energy, 4 turn cooldown instant support skill. Triss teleports 1 to 5 tiles away, gains physical and magical shields, and restores 2 energy. Her auxiliary passive, Resolve, activates once per battle. After triggering, Triss teleports to the closest ally within 2 to 6 tiles and gains her physical and magical shields. At rank 1, I recommend Fireball. Fireball is a 2 energy, 0 turn cooldown skill. Triss deals 170% fire AoE damage to all enemies within 1 tile of the target and applies 1 stack of ignition. Affected tiles become burning, and enemies hit also suffer healing received and attack 2 debuffs. Pocket Elixir is a passive support skill that heals the ally with the lowest HP percentage for 50% of her magical attack and grants Dimension Traveler allies level 2 attack and defense buffs. At a cost of 2 energy, Fireball boasts a high skill multiplier, with its debuffs serving as valuable bonuses. Pocket Elixir is a situational support skill, and the level 2 buffs it provides can easily be supplemented by other sources as your roster expands. At rank 3, I recommend Firestorm with a Castalia for Hailstorm. Firestorm targets a selected tile, dealing 140% fire AoE damage to all enemies within 2 tiles. It inflicts 1 stack of ignition and turns the affected tiles into burning for 2 turns. Before attacking, Triss's attack increases by 20%. Hailstorm targets a selected tile, dealing 55% ice AoE damage to all enemies within 3 tiles. It inflicts 2 stacks of minor frostbite and turns the affected tiles into frosty for 2 turns. Before attacking, Triss's attack increases by 20%, and after attacking, Triss prepares for 1 turn and then automatically triggers Hailstorm a second time. Learning both skills allows Triss to trigger Rhythm of Frostfire independently in an AoE radius, in addition to inflicting enemies with both ignition and minor frostbite debuffs. At rank 5, I recommend Magic Barrier. Magic Barrier allows Triss to perform preempt before receiving a single target physical or magical attack, and gain a shield of the corresponding damage type equal to 60% of her magical attack. Note that Magic Barrier has a 3-turn cooldown. Energy Recovery decreases active damage taken by 8% and allows Triss to recover 1 energy upon receiving an active attack. Magic Barrier allows Triss to return damage upon being attacked, and Energy Recovery loses value as Triss's star level grows. At rank 7, I recommend Triss's Wrath with the Castalia for Frost Control. Triss's Wrath increases crit by 30%. Against targets with Bound, it further boosts crit by 20% and magical attack by 30%. Frost Control activates when casting ice skills. If the target is on a frosty tile, she inflicts Move 1 and Bound Vision 1 debuffs for 1 turn after attacking, and reduces the cooldown of Hailstorm by 1 turn. Triss's Wrath is a strong passive that boosts her damage. Frost Control can be useful at lower star levels to help trigger Rhythm of Frostfire more frequently, but its value decreases as Triss reaches higher star levels. Frost Control should be considered a low priority Castalia. At rank 9, I recommend Fire Arrow. Both options increase Triss's basic attack by 20%. Fire Arrow applies Scorch and turns the tile into burning, and Ice Bolt inflicts a Move 1 debuff only against healthy targets. Fire Arrow is recommended due to having greater damage potential. At rank 11, I recommend Elemental Harmony. With Elemental Harmony, when alternately casting Ice and Fire skills, Triss will restore 1 energy and reduce all class skill cooldowns by 1 turn. Elemental Harmony incentivizes weaving Ice and Fire skills, triggering Rhythm of Frostfire more frequently. Ice Shock Extra deals 60% Ice AoE damage in a 5-tile straight line, inflicting a move level 3 debuff on the first target for 2 turns, and if that target already has any movement debuffs, it also applies Frozen for 2 turns. Triss has the generic Ascension skill in Full Bloom and a unique Ascension skill, the Fearless. With the Fearless, when Triss attacks enemies with damage over time effects, her damage is increased by 15% and crit is increased by 20%. When triggering Rhythm of Frostfire, her magical attack is increased by 10% as well. Comparing In Full Bloom to the Fearless, In Full Bloom is conditional on Triss having 100% HP while having a lower damage increase than the Fearless. For skill build recommendations, this is an AoE focused build weaving Hailstorm and Firestorm to trigger Rhythm of Frostfire. At higher star level, consider substituting Elemental Harmony for Triss's Wrath as Triss becomes more self-sufficient with energy restoration and cooldown reduction. This is a single target build, weaving Ice Shock Extra and Fireball to trigger Rhythm of Frostfire. Like the previous build, at higher star level, consider substituting Elemental Harmony for Triss's Wrath. Triss's Astral Imprint is Flames of the Fearless. Ice and Fire skills have 20% increased crit damage, and when Triss triggers Rhythm of Frostfire, crit damage is increased by another 20%. As Rhythm of Frostfire is Triss's general gameplay flow, this suits her well. For other ice or fire-based characters such as Simona and Luvada, they will only benefit from the initial crit damage increase. There are more competitive weapon options available. For weapon recommendations, other than Flames of the Fearless, Nirvana is a reasonable option for the AoE damage increase, to apply ignition, and to support weaving Rhythm of Frostfire. Magic Ladle is a fair option for the magical attack and AoE damage increases, as well as for some additional movement after active AoE attacks. If none of the above are accessible to you, Diffusing Prism is a reliable and competitive option. For trinket recommendations, Roaring Flint adds another fire ability at Triss's disposal to help with triggering Rhythm of Frostfire. Bloodluxite Amulet is a good option to increase her overall magical damage, though she is unlikely to use the dying bonuses. Shield of Justice and Origin Hourglass's attribute increases are always reliable if you have these trinkets to spare. For tarot recommendations, both Verdict of Justice and Dream of the Magician are fine options for Triss's damage output, preferring Verdict of Justice to complement her crit passives and Astral Imprint, or Dream of the Magician for reliable AoE. On any maps with high target count, ranging from allies, enemies, summons, and NPCs, it is always reasonable to consider Temptation of the Devil. As for engravings, Sword and Wand remains a reliable option for the attack and defense increase after moving. Remember that any gains to her physical attack will increase her ignition and minor frostbite damage as well. For a quick overview of external category buffs, Geralt's Bonds of Kaer Morhen increases damage and piercing damage done by 10%, and by an additional 20% against enemies with bound debuffs. Rico's World's My Oyster offers damage and crit bonuses, scaling with number of targets hit. Miguel's Will Drifter uniquely provides more attack and defense than the typical leader's auras. And Samantha Everglow's Will to Cleanse All Foul increases skill damage and AoE damage. That concludes this character guide. If you have any feedback to share, please leave a comment below. I'm always open to listening and learning, and I don't mind being wrong. I'm another player improving and exploring more of Sword of Convallaria just like you. Remember, if you come across information that conflicts with other guides or content creators, it simply means there are multiple ways to build a character and still achieve success. I also want to credit the Sociage and Billy Game fan sites for their data mining, skill descriptions, and art assets. If you enjoyed this guide, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope to see you in the next one.